Let's speak to Ellie Bufkin, a former Fox News producer. Ellie, very good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Mike. It's a very sad morning.
It's a really sad morning. How's America this morning?
You know, it's very early here, but, you know, as we went to bed last night, we were in shock. And I think that your listeners, your viewers this morning that you've just read and that voice note that we listened to reflects how we're feeling here as well. Charlie was beloved among certainly conservatives, but as you mentioned, he wasn't afraid to debate anybody. He was an inspiration in that he would look into the eyes of anybody who disagreed with him, no matter how virulent they were, no matter how far afield they were, and he would reasonably have a conversation with him. And I don't know who else would be a worse target to take down over free speech than someone who was so open to having these conversations and leading the charge.
Yeah.
So it's a very sad day indeed.
It really is. And watching some of the coverage last night, it was clear on social media certainly that nobody's learned anything though, because there were people being critical of him and, you know, saying he brought it on himself, you know, because of his views, because his views were crazy and he was wild and he was out of control. And I don't see any of that. I don't understand how anyone could say that.
I agree with you. I didn't see anything. That's one of the things that's really so terrifying that's happened, you know, in this country. And, you know, actually just returned from the UK and spoke with some people who work very closely in the media, and they say the same thing. But what we are seeing, especially on the left, the political left, is that people believe a certain narrative.
Yeah.
They believe that people like Charlie are calling for, you know, imprisonment and killing of protected minorities, you know, like the LGBT community.
Yeah.
They think that he's really said these things. They can't provide evidence that he has, because certainly he has not, but they believe it. And you've seen people who even condemned the shooting saying, well, you can understand why people are celebrating though, because, you know, he did say these things, but he absolutely didn't. And that comes from the top. These sentiments come from politicians. They come from people like Matthew Dowd, who was terminated from MSNBC yesterday after saying exactly that he brought it on himself, that he is a hateful figure, which wasn't true. And I'm glad that MSNBC ended up doing the right thing and making sure that, you know, they weren't endorsing that type of speech. But
And one of the stories that, of course, Charlie focused on in his final hours of tweeting on social media was the horrible, ghastly murder, which everybody saw, of that Ukrainian young woman, Irania Zarutska, on a subway train, killed by a crazed man who happened to be black. But they didn't want to talk about the fact that he was black and the fact that it was a racial attack and the fact that, you know, he shouldn't have been walking the streets because he was insane. And he'd been let go many, many times, I think 14 times out of prison by multiple liberal judges. Yeah,
that story is such a lightning rod. And it's an incredible moment here. And I think that we're finally coming to this realization. Even on the left, you see that people can look back and see the headlines depending on who's been killed, and see how much it matters. You know, how much coverage a murder like George Floyd had versus this, you know, poor woman in North Carolina who came to the United States to escape a war zone and was ultimately brutally murdered just for sitting down on a bus. And she was certainly attacked, you know, for the color of her skin. That was said by the person. And I've heard this sentiment, and, you know, I'll repeat it here. I'm sort of tired of people getting a pass just for being, you know, quote unquote crazy. Yeah. I think anybody who attacks somebody in broad daylight with a knife is crazy. He knew what he was doing. He left the scene after he attacked this woman. He was clearly well enough to understand that he wanted to get away from being caught. Right. This is the type of crime that happens because we're too afraid of being called racist to actually punish criminals and protect the people that are so vulnerable.
Yeah, it's a shocking state of affairs. Ellie, listen, my sympathies go out to everybody this morning in America, because I love America as a country, and it's just, I can't stand what's happening there. Thank you very much indeed. Let's have a look at what Charlie Kirk's final tweet actually was about that case.
On August 22nd, Irina Zarutska was stabbed to death on the rail system in Charlotte, North Carolina by a savage career criminal.
This was one of the coldest, most senseless murders I've ever seen. She had no interaction with this guy whatsoever. She was sitting minding her own business, and he just takes out a knife and just decides to stab her. I do say this with some form of just heaviness. I don't like politicizing situations like this, but it just necessitates it because there are so many dynamics at play here. Based on the information evidence we have, the attacker did say, "I got that white girl." The attacker racialized it in his own telling of this situation. And we all know this. Any honest observer of your program knows this, including Van Jones even knows this deep down, which is that, of course, if a random white person on a subway took out a knife and stabbed a black girl senselessly to death, there would be massive media coverage, there would be policy changes, there would be people having to apologize for this. We saw this in George Floyd, and yet, for whatever reason, this situation has not garnered even a fraction of that kind of outrage or back.
A terrible situation in America, a country divided over free speech, over, you know, the truth of what's actually going on.